Mr. Lee, she is the young bride you married for good fortune and abandoned in the side residence for 3 years. The news that Lee Corporation had secured an international order worth more than 100 billion yuan spread through the entire building at 3 o'clock on Wednesday afternoon, when old Ju, the director of the marketing department, walked out of the conference room on the 26th floor. The folder in his hand nearly fell to the ground. He leaned against the wall for half a minute before he finally recovered enough to speak to the person beside him. It was not our marketing department. His voice sounded as if he had just seen a ghost. It was a woman whose name none of us had ever heard before. She went in alone and signed the order in 10 minutes. The news spread from the 26th floor like wildfire. Within half an hour, more than 2,000 employees in the company knew 3 things. First, Lee Corporation had obtained the exclusive Asia-Pacific distribution rights for the international giant Eastern Group. The total value of the contract exceeded 100 billion yuan. Second, the person who secured the contract was not a member of the marketing department or any executive at Lee Corporation. Third, after signing the agreement, the woman simply walked out of the conference room. She left no business card and no contact information. She only signed one name on the final page. By the time the news reached the president's office on the top floor, Li Yanghang was in the middle of a video conference. Assistant Lin pushed open the door with an expression that looked as though lightning had struck him. He placed a freshly printed copy of the contract in front of Li Yanghang and pointed toward the signature line. Li Yanghang lowered his gaze. Someone on the video conference was still giving a report, but he pressed the mute button. The air in the office seemed to thin. The room became so quiet that the hum of the air conditioning could be heard clearly. 3 characters appeared on the signature line. The handwriting was neat and graceful. Every stroke possessed a clean quality rarely seen in the business world. Ji Yunshang. Li Yanghang stared at the name for a long time, so long that Assistant Lin finally stepped half a pace closer and asked quietly, "Mr. Li, should I investigate?" Li Yanghang placed down the contract and leaned back in his chair. Beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows, the city skyline reflected cold afternoon light. His long fingers tapped the desk 3 times. It was a habit he displayed before making an important decision. "Investigate immediately," he said. "Find this woman." Assistant Lin was famous throughout Lee Corporation for his efficiency. Less than an hour later, Ji Yunshang's information was placed on Li Yanhang's desk. The file was extremely thin. It contained only several pages, but every page made Assistant Lin's frown deepen. The first page contained her basic personal information. Ji Yunshang, 23 years old, originally from Jiangcheng. Her education was listed as a bachelor's degree from the business school of Jiangcheng University. She had graduated only 3 months earlier. The second page contained her employment record at Lee Corporation. She had joined the company 3 years ago and was officially assigned to the administrative reception desk, but the attendance records showed that she had never worked a single day. Her salary had been paid, her social insurance had been maintained. Yet the position column remained blank. The third page listed her address. She did not live in an employee dormitory or an apartment in the city. She lived in the independent 2-story side residence behind the Lee family estate. The house stood less than 500 meters from the main residence, hidden behind a row of osmanthus trees. It was so quiet that the entire Lee family seemed to have forgotten it existed. Assistant Lin's fingers trembled slightly as he placed the file in front of Li Yanghang. He had followed Li Yanghang for 7 years and had witnessed countless crises, but this time, he truly did not know how to begin. "Mr. Li," he cleared his throat. "This Ji Yunshang lives in the side residence registered under your name." Li Yanhang's hand stopped halfway through turning a page. "The side residence. The one behind the old family estate." Assistant Lin's voice grew quieter. "She is the person your grandmother arranged 3 years ago." He did not finish the sentence, but Li Yanghang remembered. The scene from 3 years earlier slowly emerged from the deepest part of his memory like an old recording that had been sealed away. It had been a rainy spring day. The main hall of the Li family estate had been decorated with red silk and double happiness symbols. Li Yanghang had just returned from overseas. The wrinkles from the long flight still marked his suit when his grandmother pulled him before the ancestral tablets. "Yanghang, this is Yunshang, the daughter of the Ji family. We compared your birth charts. She will bring you good fortune." His grandmother had spoken with absolute certainty that sounded almost like an order. A young woman in a white dress stood beside her with her head lowered. He had not even seen her face clearly at the time. He had considered the entire situation absurd. It was the 21st century. Who still arranged a marriage to bring good fortune to an ill family? But his grandmother's health had been deteriorating. He could not oppose her then. They completed the traditional ceremony and registered the marriage that same night. He flew back to New York before leaving. He gave the housekeeper one instruction: put her in the side residence. Do not let her bother me. She remained there for 3 years. During that time, he returned to the family estate countless times. He attended his grandmother's birthday celebrations and handled family matters. His car passed the side residence every time, but he never stopped once. The Osmanthus flowers bloomed and fell, then bloomed and fell again. The person living inside the house had been completely erased from his memory. Now the woman he had abandoned for 3 years had signed her name on a 100 billion yuan contract. Li Yanghang turned to the final page of the file. A surveillance photograph from the lobby of Li Corporation had been attached. The woman in the picture wore a white shirt dress. Her hair was tied into a simple ponytail. Flat shoes covered her feet. She stood before several foreign representatives from Eastern Group and signed the contract. The image quality was not especially high, but when enlarged, her profile could be seen. Her features were gentle, her skin was pale, and a calmness that was difficult to describe rested between her brows. She looked completely different from the young woman in the white dress who had lowered her head 3 years ago. She had returned to Li Corporation after being ignored by him for 3 full years, and while he could no longer remember what she looked like, she had returned in the most impossible way. Assistant Lin, Li Yanghang closed the file. His voice was lower than usual. Find out how she obtained the Eston project. I also want to know everything she has done during the past 3 years in the side residence. Assistant Lin nodded and turned to leave. Li Yanghang stopped him. Prepare the car. He stood and took the suit jacket hanging from the back of his chair. His movements were sharp and decisive. I am going to the side residence. Now. Assistant Lin opened his mouth, then closed it again. He had worked with Li Yanghang long enough to understand his temperament. When this man said now, no one could make him wait until tomorrow. The Rolls-Royce left the underground parking garage of Li Corporation as evening descended. It passed through the neon lights of the city center and headed toward the old Li family estate in the eastern part of the city. Li Yanghang sat in the back seat. The city lights passed across the cold lines of his face. His phone screen remained illuminated. It displayed a scan of the final page of the 100 billion yuan contract. The name Ji Yunshang rested quietly on the signature line. It seemed to be offering him a silent invitation. The Osmanthus trees around the side residence had grown as high as the second-floor windows. It was late autumn, and golden blossoms covered the branches. A sweet fragrance filled the air. When Li Yanghang pushed open the iron gate, Osmanthus petals fell across his shoulders. He stood in the courtyard and looked at the small house. It felt unfamiliar. The property belonged to the Li family, but he had never examined it carefully. It had white walls, grey tiles, several pots of green plants on the windowsill, and steps that had been swept perfectly clean. The door was unlocked. When he pushed it open, lights were on inside. Warm yellow light flowed from the living room. A faint fragrance of jasmine tea drifted through the air. It was gentle and comforting. The living room was not large, but everything was clean and organized. 2 plain cushions rested on a fabric sofa. A laptop and several documents lay open on the coffee table beside a half-finished cup of tea. A bookshelf stood in one corner. It was packed with books on business management, international trade, and original English-language economics journals. If he had not known who lived there, he would have believed he had entered the rented home of a young professional. Ji Yunshang came out of the kitchen holding a cup of hot water. She wore pale grey clothes suitable for home. Her sleeves had been folded twice, revealing slender pale wrists. Her hair fell loosely over her shoulders. She looked younger and quieter than she did in the photograph. When she saw an additional person in the living room, her steps paused, but it was not the pause of someone frightened by an intruder. It felt more like a calm acknowledgement. So, you have arrived. She looked at him. Her eyes were as still as a lake without wind. Mr. Li, she said, please sit. There was no surprise, no panic, no demand to know why he had come. She reacted as though she were receiving a visitor with an appointment, polite, composed, and maintaining exactly the correct distance. Li Yanghang stood in the center of the living room and realized she was nothing like he had imagined. He had expected to find a resentful wife. A woman neglected for 3 years should have cried, shouted, and demanded to know why he had ignored her during the drive. He had even prepared a response. An apology was unnecessary, but he could offer an explanation. After all, she had signed the 100 billion yuan contract as president of the company. He had a responsibility to meet the person who had achieved it, but she did none of those things. She sat on the sofa, placed the hot water before her, and pushed a document across the coffee table. Her movements were calm, as though she were handling routine business. Mr. Li, since you are here, the timing is convenient. Please look at this, sign it if there are no problems. Li Yanghang lowered his gaze, for black words were printed across the cover. Divorce agreement. He remained standing. You want a divorce? Yes. Ji Yunsheng lifted her cup and took a small sip. Her tone was as casual as if she were discussing the weather. We agreed 3 years ago that I would leave when you no longer needed a bride to bring you good fortune. Li Yanghang remained silent for a long time. The sweet fragrance of osman thus drifted through the narrow opening in the window. It did not match the strange atmosphere in the living room. What do you mean by no longer needing one? He asked. Your grandmother recovered, and your career is stable. She placed down her cup. I signed the contract for you. Consider it my contribution to the Li family for these 3 years. Her tone remained calm. The marriage has served its purpose. My work is complete, so I can leave. Li Yanghang stared at her from beginning to end. No emotion appeared in her voice. She spoke as though describing someone else's life. It was not that she was hiding resentment. She genuinely did not care. She did not care about the marriage, his arrival, or the title of Mrs. Li. She had treated everything as a 3-year job. Now the contract period had ended, and she was submitting her resignation. Nothing more. Who gave you the information for the Eston contract? He asked. I found it myself. Ji Yunsheng stood, walked to the bookshelf, and removed a thick folder. She handed it to him. Eston held a supplier conference in London 6 months ago. A classmate from business school sent me the minutes. I spent 3 months studying their requirements and another 3 months preparing the proposal. Last week, their team came to China to inspect potential suppliers. I met them, negotiated for 10 minutes, and they signed. Li Yanghang opened the folder. It was filled with detailed notes. Important points had been marked in Chinese beside English language materials. Every page contained her comments from Eston's history to its financial reports from the previous 5 years, from its product lines to gaps in its Asia-Pacific distribution channels. Every detail had been analyzed clearly. At the end was a complete product presentation. The layout was professional. The data was extensive. It used Li Corporation's official template. If the proposal had been submitted by the marketing department, it would have been considered equal to anything produced by its best employees. Did you study this before? I taught myself. She removed several international trade textbooks from the shelf and brushed the dust from their covers. 3 years is a long time. 3 years, while he had traveled between New York and Shanghai, signed projects worth tens of billions, acquired 3 companies, and transformed Li Corporation from a domestic enterprise into a multinational group. She had lived inside the side residence he had forgotten. She had taught herself international trade from the beginning. Then, without saying a word, she had signed the largest overseas contract in the history of Li Corporation. Li Yanghang placed the folder back on the table. I will not sign this divorce agreement. Ji Yunsheng's cup stopped halfway toward her mouth for the first time. A faint change appeared in her expression. One eyebrow lifted slightly. Then she placed down the cup, picked up her phone, opened the calendar, and turned the screen toward him. Next Monday is grandmother's 80th birthday. She said she would announce something important during the banquet. It is probably related to a marriage arrangement involving the Li family. She put away the phone. Her tone remained calm, but a faint distance had entered her eyes. Do not worry, I will finish the performance. After the birthday banquet, sign the divorce agreement. Then neither of us will owe the other anything. She stood and walked toward the kitchen. When she passed him, she paused. Mr. Li, you are blocking the water dispenser. Li Yanghang stepped aside. He watched her enter the kitchen, fill her cup, return to the sofa, and continue working on her laptop. It was as though no visitor stood inside the room. He remained near the entrance. The osman thus fragrance grew stronger outside. The sky had become completely dark. Assistant Lin paced near the car with his phone pressed to his ear. Inside the small house he had entered for the first time after 3 years, Li Yanghang found himself silenced by a woman whose face he had once failed to notice. A cup of tea, a contract, and one polite address of Mr. Li had blocked every response he had prepared. He turned to leave. At the door, he stopped and looked back at Ji Yunsheng on the sofa. I will arrange everything for grandmother's banquet next Monday. You will return to the main residence with me. Ji Yunsheng did not lift her head. Her fingers continued moving across the keyboard. Fine, she said. One word, no excitement, no false refusal. It sounded like acceptance of a temporary work assignment. Once she agreed, she returned to her task. Li Yanghang pushed open the gate. Assistant Lin hurried forward. Mr. Li, I found more information. Miss Ji ranked among the top 5 students in the business school at Jiangcheng University. Her graduation thesis was titled Localization and Distribution Strategies of Multinational Corporations. Her supervising professor is a national authority in international trade. Assistant Lin studied Li Yanhang's expression before continuing carefully. During the past 3 years, she had no record of social activities in the side residence. She did not even order food deliveries. Whenever she left, she either went to the library or attended English classes in the city. Li Yanhang opened the car door and entered the back seat. After a moment of silence, he said, "Ask her to attend tomorrow's meetings." "Which meeting?" "All of them." Li Yanhang leaned against the seat as streetlights moved across his face. "The EDSA review meeting, the marketing strategy meeting, and the senior executive meeting, she will attend." "Every one." Assistant Lin froze briefly, then quickly wrote the instruction in his notebook. "One more thing." Li Yanhang's voice came from the back seat. An unfamiliar emotion had entered it. "Move her from the side residence into the main house." "Move her into the main house." Assistant Lin's voice rose involuntarily. "She is Mrs. Li." Li Yanhang turned his head and looked through the car window at the warm light inside the side residence. "It is natural for her to live in the main house." Assistant Lin glanced at his employer through the rearview mirror and wisely remained silent. During 7 years beside Li Yanhang, he had seen him force opponents into corners during negotiations. He had seen him control board meetings and remain indifferent toward women who openly pursued him. But before and after entering the side residence that evening, his employer seemed like two different people. The forgotten Mrs. Li had lived inside the small house hidden behind Osmanthus trees. Now Li Yanhang intended to bring her personally into everyone's view. The lights inside the side residence remained on for a long time. Ji Yunshang sat on the sofa and checked every page of the proposal on her laptop to make certain no details had been missed. The fragrance of Osmanthus outside became stronger. The night wind moved the curtains. Finally, the black car beyond the courtyard started its engine and left the lane. She closed the laptop, leaned against the sofa, and took a sip of jasmine tea that had already turned cold. The divorce agreement remained open on the coffee table. Beside it was a notice for the EDSA project review meeting. Assistant Lin had sent it to her through the company system moments earlier. She glanced at it, then placed her phone face down on the sofa. When Li Yanhang said he would not sign the divorce agreement, the strength in his eyes had been the same strength he used when refusing to compromise in business, but to him, the marriage had become an unexpected advantage. Beyond an ordinary contract, he had discovered she was useful, so he did not intend to release her to her. It was simply the end of a 3-year employment period. She had spent 3 years preparing herself, not so she could remain Mrs. Li. She wanted to leave without shame and without owing anyone. Another layer of Osmanthus petals fell outside. Golden flowers covered the steps like thin snow. Monday would arrive soon. When Li Yanhang said all of them, Assistant Lin believed he had heard incorrectly. He had worked beside Li Yanhang for 7 years, rising from assistant to chief secretary of the president's office. He had seen more difficult situations than half of Li Corporation's executives. Yet his employer, who rarely repeated himself, said it again: the EDSA review meeting, the marketing strategy meeting, and the senior executive meeting, she will attend all of them. Then he paused and added, "Give her a seat near the front. She is not an observer, she is a formal participant." Assistant Lin wrote quickly. The tip of his pen left a long line of ink across the paper. He did not dare ask questions, but his thoughts moved rapidly. Mrs. Li was about to appear publicly at the company. The woman who had been abandoned in a side residence for 3 years had signed a 100 billion yuan contract. Now the president had personally ordered that she sit at the front of the conference room. More than 2,000 employees would soon have their own interpretations of what that meant. The news spread faster than Assistant Lin expected. The EDSA project review meeting was scheduled for 9 on Thursday morning. Before 8:30, several people had gathered outside the large conference room on the 26th floor. Old Ju, the marketing director, paced beside the entrance. He held his folder tightly, and anxiety covered his face. Director Wang from administration leaned against the wall with a cup of coffee and spoke quietly to the person beside her. "I heard Mrs. Li has never worked a day in the company. Today will be her first senior management meeting. She did more than avoid the company. Someone said she has lived in the side residence behind the family estate for 3 years. Mr. Li never visited her once. Then how did she secure EDSA? That is a 100 billion yuan order. Our department pursued the project for 6 months and could not even obtain the contact information of one vice president. Perhaps she was lucky. Can luck sign a 100 billion yuan contract in 10 minutes? You try it." Their whispers moved through the corridor. The elevator doors opened. Every voice stopped. Ji Yunshang stepped out. She wore no extravagant clothing. A white blouse was paired with dark blue wide-legged trousers. Her hair was tied into a low ponytail, and beige low-heeled shoes covered her feet. She wore no noticeable jewelry. The only object that might have been considered decoration was a slender silver watch around her wrist, but as she entered the corridor, everyone instinctively stepped backward. It was not because she appeared aggressive. Her presence possessed a quiet quality that could not be ignored. That calmness contrasted sharply with the tension around her. Everyone else looked prepared for battle. She appeared to be attending an ordinary morning meeting. "Miss G, this way." Assistant Lin appeared at the correct moment and guided her toward the conference room. Ji Yunshang nodded and walked at an even pace. Wherever she passed, whispers fell silent as though cut apart. Only after the conference room door closed behind her did the corridor erupt again. "Did you see her when she walked past me? I was afraid to breathe. Her presence is too powerful. How could anyone call her a bitter wife abandoned for 3 years? I suddenly think this meeting will be difficult." The core members of the EDSA project were already inside. Approximately 20 people sat on both sides of the long table. They represented marketing, legal affairs, and finance. 2 screens displayed executives joining remotely from overseas branches. Li Yanghang sat at the head of the table. His suit jacket rested across the back of his chair. He wore only a dark grey shirt with the sleeves folded twice. Ji Yunshang had been assigned a subtle position. She sat in the third seat to Li Yanhang's left. It was neither a position of honor nor an observer's seat. Everyone could see her without the placement appearing deliberately prominent. After sitting, she removed a folder from her bag. Inside were the notes she had prepared for the EDSA project. Her movements were calm and perfectly organized. Li Yanghang looked at her once, then announced the beginning of the meeting. Old Ju gave the first report for 20 minutes. He explained the next stage of the EDSA project. His presentation covered distribution, brand promotion, after-sales support, and customer management. He displayed dozens of slides filled with data and charts. After finishing, he remained standing and looked carefully toward Li Yanghang for approval. Li Yanghang said nothing. He turned toward Ji Yunshang. "What do you think?" Everyone in the conference room froze. This was her first formal meeting. Even if she had signed the 100 billion yuan contract, why would President Li ask her opinion first on the highly specialized issue of implementation? Ji Yunshang turned to one page in her folder. She looked down briefly, then raised her head. Her voice was quiet but clear. "Mr. Herman, EDSA's Asia-Pacific director, made a request during the signing process that was omitted from the formal agreement." "What request?" Old Ju frowned. "The response time for after-sales service." Ji Yunshang pushed the document forward and placed one finger on a line of notes. "Mr. Herman explained that EDSA promises on-site service within 48 hours in Europe, but the logistics network in the Asia-Pacific region is different. If we cannot offer the same response time, EDSA wants an additional compensation clause. For every day beyond 48 hours, 1,000th of the corresponding order value would be deducted." He mentioned this twice. The first time was during the 5th minute of the meeting, the second time was immediately before signing. He was interrupted both times, so it was not included in the final agreement. But he will raise it again during implementation. "If we do not prepare a solution in advance, we will be placed at a disadvantage." The conference room remained silent for 5 seconds. Old Ju opened his mouth. His expression changed from doubt to disbelief, then to something more complicated. He searched his notebook and the copy of the contract. A thin layer of sweat appeared across his forehead. "Miss G is correct. Mr. Herman did mention it. I believed it was a minor detail, so I did not report it. It is not a minor detail." Ji Yunshang's tone remained calm, but every word landed steadily. EDSA's European partners can accept a 48-hour response time because their warehouse networks cover a radius of less than 500 kilometers. The Asia-Pacific region is far larger. Even the fastest route from our central warehouse to customers in Southeast Asia requires 72 hours. If we do not clarify this issue with EDSA before the contract becomes active, accumulated delay penalties could reduce first quarter profit by at least 3 percentage points. After finishing, she turned back one page and continued reading her notes. Old Ju's face had turned red. He had worked in marketing for 15 years and managed countless projects. Never had a newcomer identified one of his mistakes with such precision. He could not argue because every statement she made was supported by evidence. Li Yanghang leaned back and tapped the table once. "Old Ju, revise the after-sales plan within 1 week and submit it directly to me. Miss G, review the contract details with the legal department. Mark every omission." "Understood." Ji Yunshang did not lift her head. The meeting continued. During the legal report, she identified 2 inaccurate translations in the contract. During the financial report, she corrected a misplaced decimal in a currency conversion. Whenever she spoke, her voice remained quiet and her pace unhurried. but every sentence reached the center of the problem. Her precision was not aggressive, it was simply factual and free from emotion. She resembled a plain ruler straightening every bent line. When the meeting ended, people left one after another, every expression looked as though it had been recalibrated. At the door, old Ju turned back. Li Yanghang remained in his chair while Ji Yunshang organized her papers. Old Ju withdrew his gaze and silently gave himself a failing grade for the day. The marketing strategy meeting began at 2 that afternoon. The subject was the initial pricing model for Eston's products. The marketing department had prepared 3 plans: conservative, balanced, aggressive. Current market research suggested the conservative model was safest. The aggressive model involved the highest risk but also the greatest profit. The deputy marketing director was a woman in her early 30s named Qin. She wore her hair short and possessed sharp eyes. She had complete confidence in her proposal. She spoke rapidly and changed slides with impressive speed. On the final page, she began announcing her conclusion. Director Qin. A voice came from beside Li Yanghang. Deputy Director Qin's words stopped in her throat. Every gaze returned to Ji Yunshang. She placed down her pen and looked at the woman. There was no hostility in her peaceful expression, but her next words immediately froze Deputy Director Qin's smile. Your pricing model uses Eston's European prices from the first quarter, but Eston increased its European prices in March. The latest price is 12% higher than the first quarter figure. If we submit an offer based on your model, Eston will immediately force our launch price downward. We will surrender all negotiating power. Deputy Director Qin stood motionless with the presentation remote in her hand. Her lips moved, her voice became half as loud as before. They raised prices in March. I did not receive that information. Eston updated its website last month. It is public information. Silence filled the room again. Deputy Director Qin's face changed from pale red to deep crimson. She lowered her head and placed the remote on the table. I will verify it. If it is true, we will rebuild the pricing plan. Li Yanghang said nothing throughout the exchange. He leaned back and watched Ji Yunshang's profile. She reviewed the pricing report and marked it with a red pen. Sunlight entered through the windows and touched her lowered eyes. Her lashes cast faint shadows across her cheeks. 3 years earlier, the young woman in white had not dared raise her head before him. Now she sat in his conference room and left executives earning millions each year without a response. Her weapon was not a mysterious business strategy, it was the most basic discipline: carefulness, concentration, refusing to ignore any detail. Everyone in the room had been taught those principles. Few had continued practicing them after the meeting. Ji Yunshang gathered her papers. Deputy Director Qin stopped her at the door. Miss Ji, how did you discover the price increase? Her earlier pride had disappeared. Only honest curiosity remained. I check Eston's website every day, but I truly did not see it. Ji Yunshang placed the folder inside her bag and closed the zipper. The main English website was updated last month, but the German subpage was updated 1 week earlier. If you only read the English version, you receive the information 1 week later. I asked a classmate studying in Germany to watch the German pages. She sent me a screenshot of the pricing notice. Deputy Director Qin remained silent for a long time. Then she said something Ji Yunshang had not expected. Thank you, Miss Ji. She extended her hand, her eyes were sincere. Today, your skills were better than mine, and I learned something. At the next meeting, I will not make you correct my omissions. Ji Yunshang shook her hand, nodded, and left. At the end of the corridor, Assistant Lin walked quickly toward her. He held a phone and wore an unusual expression, as though he had just completed a difficult call. Miss Ji, Mr. Li asked me to inform you that your dress and styling for Monday's birthday banquet have been arranged. Someone will collect you at 10 tomorrow morning for a fitting. You do not need to concern yourself with any details. Everything has been coordinated. Ji Yunshang nodded. Assistant Lin hesitated, then lowered his voice. Mr. Li also said that after the fitting, you should move directly into the main residence. Someone is already packing your belongings at the side residence. Ji Yunshang's fingers paused around the folder. She looked toward Li Yanhang's office at the end of the corridor. The dark wooden double doors were closed. The person inside was probably reviewing every note she had made during the meetings. She withdrew her gaze and smiled faintly at Assistant Lin. Fine. Assistant Lin watched her enter the elevator. Only after the doors closed did he release a long breath. He had spent 7 years at Li Corporation. He had seen countless formal dinners and women attempting to please Li Yanghang, but he had never seen anyone like Ji Yunshang. She had been told to move into the main estate and live beside the president, yet she remained as calm as if she had accepted a short business trip. The elevator stopped on the first floor. When Ji Yunshang walked through the lobby, Several receptionists stood simultaneously, their eyes followed her until she passed through the revolving doors. No one called her name, no one dared approach. Her performance during the 2 meetings on the 26th floor had already spread through the company's private chat groups. Someone described it with 4 words: a complete difference in level. Ji Yunshang knew nothing about the discussions. She left Lee Corporation and stood beside a flower bed near the road. The early autumn wind carried the smell of ginkgo leaves and car exhaust. She removed her phone from her bag. An unread message from her mother appeared on the screen. Yunshang, your father's medical fees are due again this month. Can you send us more money? Her finger remained above the screen for a moment, then she typed, I understand, I will transfer it before the end of the month. She returned the phone to her bag and looked at the dark blue glass tower before her. The windows on the 26th floor reflected cold afternoon light. Behind one of them, Li Yanghang was probably reading the notes from the meetings. The way he looked at her had changed since the brief glance 3 years ago, but for now, that change was only an unexpected development beyond her work. She had not come to Lee Corporation or signed the Eston contract to prove herself. She had not done it to make him look at her. She needed money enough to pay her father's medical expenses and redeem herself from the 3-year marriage contract. Now the money was enough. She had submitted the divorce agreement. After performing one final role at Monday's birthday banquet, she could leave without owing anyone. Ji Yunshang adjusted the strap of her canvas bag and walked toward the subway station. At 10 the following morning, the car sent by assistant Lin arrived at the side residence. It was a black business vehicle with a discreet silver emblem used by the Li family. The person sent to collect her was housekeeper Wu from the old estate. He was in his 50s, with grey hair and an energetic appearance. He wore a dark grey traditional jacket. His attitude toward Ji Yunshang was extremely respectful, but the respect contained obvious examination. He had served the Li family for 30 years, beginning during the time of Li Yanhang's grandfather. He understood the value of the title Mrs. Li better than anyone. Miss Ji, please. Housekeeper Wu opened the rear door. The car crossed the city and stopped before an independent white building. It was a private custom design studio that did not accept ordinary customers. Every client required an appointment. The interior was much larger than the exterior suggested. Formal gowns covered 3 walls. There were traditional kapows, evening dresses, suzhou embroidery, and French lace. Every piece looked as though it belonged in a museum. A middle-aged woman in a black dress approached. She held a book of fabric samples and wore a perfectly warm smile. You must be Miss Ji. Mr. Li contacted us in advance. We will select 3 outfits today, 1 main dress for the birthday banquet, 1 alternative, and 1 casual outfit for afterward. Please follow me. Ji Yunshang stood on a circular platform inside the fitting room and watched herself change clothes in the mirror. The first dress was a pale gold chipao. It made her look too old. The second was a pink tulle dress. It appeared too sweet. The third was a dark green velvet gown. The neckline was modest but elegant. The waist was fitted closely. The hem reached her ankles and moved like dark green water around her feet. Subtle plum blossoms were embroidered along the sleeves and neckline. They were almost invisible until light touched them and revealed a faint silver glow. The designer stepped backward and examined her for a long time. Then she turned toward the fitting room entrance. Mr. Li, what do you think? Ji Yunshang saw him in the mirror. Li Yanghang had arrived without her noticing. He leaned against the doorframe. One hand rested inside his trouser pocket, the other hung loosely beside him. He wore no suit jacket, only a pale grey shirt with 2 buttons open at the collar. His gaze traveled through the mirror and rested steadily on her, from head to toe, then from toe to head. Finally, it stopped on the embroidered plum blossom at her waist. This one, he said. His voice was quiet, but everyone heard it. The designer immediately recorded the decision. Her assistants began writing down accessories and shoes. Ji Yunshang met his gaze in the mirror for 1 second, then she looked away first. She turned toward the designer. Please help me with the zipper. I will change. Soft light filled the dressing area. Ji Yunshang faced away from the mirror while the designer opened the zipper along her back. The velvet dress slipped from her shoulders and revealed the white lining underneath. Her uncovered back appeared in the mirror. The skin from her shoulder blades to her waist was pale and smooth, but a long thin scar rested near the ribs on one side of her waist. It was not deep, but it remained visible beneath the light like an old knife wound. Li Yanghang had not left the doorway. His gaze stopped on the scar. How did you injure your waist? Ji Yunshang handed the dress to an assistant and placed her own coat over her shoulders. Her movements did not pause when she turned. Her expression was exactly the same as when she had corrected the financial department's mistake, calm, simple, without unnecessary emotion, 3 years ago. On the night of our wedding ceremony, Your grandmother asked me to offer incense to the Lee family ancestors. The housekeeper lost his grip on the incense burner. It fell from the altar, and one corner cut the side of my waist. 3 years ago, the night of their wedding, he had flown to New York that same evening. Before leaving, he had given the housekeeper one sentence of instruction. He had not even known where she was standing. The incense burner had injured her waist. She had treated the wound alone and spent 3 springtimes, summers, autumns, and winters inside the empty side residence. She had told no one. She had never complained until that moment. He had not known the scar existed. Li Yanghang stood beside the doorway in silence. The assistants and designer quietly withdrew. Only the 2 of them remained. The housekeeper did not tell me, he said. His voice was lower than usual. I asked him not to. Ji Yunshang buttoned her coat 1 button at a time, smoothed the fabric, and arranged her hair before the mirror. You were flying to New York to sign an important acquisition agreement. Assistant Lin later said the project allowed you to enter the North American market. Being struck by an incense burner was not important enough to distract you. Her tone was light. She truly sounded as though she were describing something insignificant. Li Yanghang remained silent for a long time. In the future, you do not need to hide anything from me. Ji Yunshang looked at him in the mirror. The glance was so brief that he had no time to interpret it before she looked away. Fine, she said. Housekeeper Wu entered and quietly spoke beside Li Yanghang. Li Yanghang nodded and turned to leave. At the doorway, he stopped without looking back. The move to the main residence will happen this afternoon. Return for dinner tonight. Grandmother wants to see you. Ji Yunshang watched him disappear. She fastened the final button of her coat and lifted her canvas bag from the chair. The designer hurried after her and offered a beautiful card with both hands. Miss Ji, the gown will be delivered to the main Lee residence on Sunday morning. Please leave your contact information. Tell us immediately if you require any adjustments. Ji Yunshang accepted the card and placed it in her bag. When she left the studio, warm sunlight covered the white marble steps outside. Housekeeper Wu opened the car door. He spoke a form of address she had never heard from him before. Madam, please enter. Madam, during the previous 3 years, the servants at the side residence called her Miss Ji. The staff at the main residence rarely addressed her at all. Whenever housekeeper Wu saw her, he offered only a formal nod. Today he had changed the title. He had seen the way Li Yanghang watched her from the fitting room doorway. Ji Yunshang entered the back seat and closed her eyes against the leather headrest. The car left the narrow lane and joined the city traffic. The sound outside became a distant background through the insulated windows. 3 days remained before the birthday banquet. Once the performance ended, she could leave, but before that, she had to eat dinner with Li Yanghang and return to the place where an incense burner had scarred her waist 3 years earlier. She would also meet the person who had arranged this marriage, old Madam Li. Dinner at the old Li estate was scheduled for 7, half an hour beforehand. Housekeeper Wu and 2 servants prepared the dining room. The Li family estate consisted of 3 connected courtyards. The front courtyard contained the garden. The central courtyard held the main reception hall. The rear courtyard was where old Madam Li lived. The dining room stood in the eastern wing of the rear courtyard. The long rosewood table could seat 20 people. But only 4 people would dine that evening: old Madam Li, Li Yanghang, Ji Yunshang, and Li Yanhang's cousin, Li Yushan. Li Yushan was already sitting in the living room when Ji Yunshang arrived. She wore a pink Chanel suit and held a glass of red wine. Her legs were crossed while she scrolled through her phone. When Ji Yunshang entered, Li Yushan raised her eyes and examined her. Then she smiled toward a servant. So this is the woman cousin married to bring good fortune. I spent 3 years overseas, and this is the first time I have seen her. Yushan. Old Madam Li came from the inner room with an ebony cane. She gave her granddaughter a measured look. Li Yushan stuck out her tongue, placed down the wineglass, and rose to help the old woman to the table. As she passed Ji Yunshang, she deliberately slowed. Her gaze rested on Ji Yunshang's white blouse for 2 seconds. The corner of her mouth turned downward. She said nothing, but her expression said everything. Ji Yunshang did not look at her. She approached the table and bowed slightly. Hello, grandmother. Old Madam Li was 79. Her silver hair was arranged perfectly. She wore a dark blue traditional jacket with decorative fastenings. She sat at the head of the table with her cane and examined Ji Yunshang from head to toe. Then she nodded. Sit. Ji Yunshang sat in the second seat on the old woman's right. It was beside Li Yanhang's place. The dishes and chopsticks had already been arranged. Li Yushan sat opposite her and rested her chin on one hand. She looked at Ji Yunshang as though examining an old item found in a warehouse. Sister-in-law, her tone was sweet enough to become unpleasant. I heard you have attracted a great deal of attention at the company. You even helped cousin sign a major contract. I would never have guessed that 3 years hidden in the side residence could produce so much ability. Yushan, old Madam Li looked at her again. I am only curious. Li Yushan moved the wine inside her glass and continued staring at Ji Yunshang. Please do not misunderstand. Sister-in-law, I simply find it interesting. You spent 3 years in the side residence and barely went outside. How did you suddenly meet someone from Eston? How did you convince them in 10 minutes? You should teach me. The words sounded like praise, but each contained a sharp point. A woman hidden for 3 years could not possibly know the decision-makers behind a 100 billion yuan project. Had she used some shameful method? Ji Yunshang lifted her tea, took a sip, and placed it down. Then she looked at Li Yushan. Mr. Herman, Eston's Asia-Pacific director, was introduced by my professor at Jiangcheng University. My professor's surname is Zheng. He is one of the country's leading scholars in international trade. When Mr. Herman visited China 5 years ago, Professor Zheng provided consultation to his team. This time, when Eston searched for a domestic partner, Professor Zheng recommended Li Corporation. Her voice remained quiet. She spoke slowly and clearly. As for the negotiation, Mr. Herman is German. His style is based on rational decision-making. When the data is sufficient and the logic is clear, he makes decisions quickly. While preparing the proposal, I studied the contract terms of every Eston partner in Europe. I predicted the issues he would care about most. I had an answer prepared for every question. That is why the negotiation required only 10 minutes. The dining room became silent. Li Yushan's smile remained frozen. The wine shook inside her glass and nearly spilled. She had intended to use education and background to humiliate Ji Yunshang. Instead, Ji Yunshang explained the entire negotiation logically. The Professor Herman's decision-making style, the contract details of Eston's European partners. Every point could be verified. It was not luck or personal connections. It was preparation so complete that the German executive had no reason to refuse. Li Yushan took a sip of wine and abandoned the subject, but the resentment in her eyes remained obvious. Old Madam Li looked at Ji Yunshang again. The glance was brief, but much of the earlier examination had disappeared. Professor Zheng was your teacher. The old woman spoke unexpectedly. The same Professor Zheng who appeared on the National Financial Channel. Yes, grandmother. Ji Yunshang nodded. He taught international trade practice during my 2nd year. Later, I applied to become his research assistant and worked with him for 2 years. Old Madam Li gave a quiet acknowledgement and drank her tea. Housekeeper Wu's voice came from the entrance. Young master has returned. Li Yanghang entered the dining room without his jacket. He wore only a dark grey shirt. He bowed beside his grandmother and greeted her. Then he pulled out the chair beside Ji Yunshang and sat. The movement was natural, as though the position had always belonged to him. The moment Li Yushan saw her cousin, her expression changed into a warm smile. She placed food on his plate and began asking whether he had lost weight and whether the company was busy. Li Yanghang gave brief answers, but his gaze moved toward Ji Yunshang's plate. She had barely eaten. Only one small corner of the rice inside her bowl was missing. Do you dislike the food? He asked. The food is fine. Ji Yunshang placed a bite in her mouth and swallowed. Li Yanghang said nothing more, but he reached toward the steamed sea base at the far end of the table and moved it in front of her. The gesture was casual. It seemed completely ordinary, but everyone noticed. Li Yushan's chopsticks stopped halfway through the air. Old Madam Li's hand paused around her teacup. The Li Yanghang they knew never personally moved dishes for anyone, even when serving his grandmother. He asked a servant to turn the table. Today, he moved the fish himself for the woman he had left alone in the side residence for 3 years. Near the end of dinner, Assistant Lin entered with a folder. He hurried to Li Yanghang and spoke quietly beside him. Mr. Li, the invitation to the Global Business Summit has arrived. The organizers called personally. They have added a special event this year. The Chinese representative who signed the Eston project has been invited to deliver a 5-minute speech. His voice was quiet, but everyone heard. Li Yushan's eyes brightened. She put down her wine and immediately began speaking sweetly to Li Yanghang. Cousin, the Global Business Summit is the highest-level commercial forum in the entire Asia-Pacific region. Last year, even my professor only received an observer's pass. Can you take me? Then she turned toward old Madam Li. Grandmother, tell cousin to take me. I will bring you something delicious when I return. Old Madam Li smiled and was about to respond. Assistant Lin cleared his throat. Mr. Li, there are only 2 places. One is your permanent position. The other belongs to the representative specifically invited by the organizers. He turned toward Ji Yunshang respectfully. The invitation names Miss Ji Yunshang. There are no additional places. Li Yushan's expression froze. The wine in her mouth seemed to become bitter. After a long time, she forced out a sentence. Her. Why does she deserve it? Because of the Eston project. Li Yanghang placed down his chopsticks. His tone was as casual as a comment about the weather. The organizers selected her. It cannot be changed. Li Yushan opened her mouth. When she saw the side of her cousin's face and understood there would be no discussion, she swallowed her words. She lowered her head and finished her wine. She said nothing else. Ji Yunshang had remained silent throughout. When assistant Lin mentioned only 2 places, she turned toward Li Yanghang. He was already looking at her. Something faint passed through his gaze. Perhaps he had known this would happen. Perhaps he had expected some reaction from her. She showed none. After dinner, housekeeper Wu guided Ji Yunshang to the easternmost room on the 2nd floor of the main residence. When the door opened, she froze. The room was far larger than she expected. A carved rosewood bed stood in the center. New satin bedding covered it. Floor-to-ceiling windows faced the rear courtyard and overlooked the Osmanthus trees and pond. Her clothes had already been placed inside the dressing room. The dark green velvet gown hung there, perfectly pressed. An unopened set of skincare products sat on the dressing table. It was the brand she normally used. Madam, the young master arranged everything this afternoon. Housekeeper Wu bowed slightly at the doorway. He said you may not have brought enough from the side residence. Tell me if anything is missing. Ji Yunshang stood in the center of the room without moving for a long time. She placed her canvas bag on the bench at the end of the bed and walked to the window. When she opened it, Osmanthus fragrance entered like thick syrup in the distance. She could see the small side residence hidden behind the trees. One lonely light glowed inside. She had never possessed a room in the main estate. On the day of the wedding 3 years earlier, she sat inside a guest room for 2 hours, then she was sent to the side residence. Today was the first time she had entered the 2nd floor of the main house as madam and lived beside Li Yanghang. What did it mean? 3 years earlier, he needed a bride to bring good fortune and treated her like a lucky decoration. 3 years later, he discovered the decoration could sign contracts and moved her from the corner to the center. In the end, it was still because she had become useful. She did not refuse. Old Madam Li's birthday banquet would be her final task. Once it ended, she would leave. The Global Business Summit was held on Saturday morning. The location was the tallest international conference center in the city. Its glass walls reflected deep blue light beneath the sun. A red carpet hundreds of meters long stretched before the entrance. Reporters carrying large cameras crowded both sides. Security was stricter than during a presidential visit. Li Yanghang wore a custom dark blue suit with a silver-gray patterned tie. Every detail of his appearance was perfect. He extended one arm for Ji Yunshang. Her hand rested lightly against it. Even through the suit fabric, she could feel the firm muscles beneath. Camera flashes exploded on both sides. Who is the woman beside President Li? I heard she is his wife, the woman who signed the Eston project. Have they not been married for 3 years? Why has no one seen her? Whispers reached them from every direction. Ji Yunshang ignored everything. She walked across the carpet with one hand around Li Yanhang's arm. Her steps were even. The dark green velvet gown reflected subtle light beneath the cameras. The embroidered plum blossoms near the neckline appeared and disappeared with every movement. Li Yanghang turned his head slightly and looked at her. Her eyes remained forward. She appeared as composed as someone who had attended events like this throughout her life. Only he knew that 3 days earlier, she had worn a white blouse and sat inside the side residence while handing him a divorce agreement. The summit took place in the largest ballroom on the 3rd floor. It could hold 2,000 people. An enormous crystal chandelier hung from the curved ceiling and filled every corner with light. Round tables for business leaders and political representatives occupied the front. Stepped media and guest seating filled the rear. Every place was occupied. Li Yanghang was guided to the center table in the first row. Ji Yunshang sat to his right. The other people at the table were older commercial leaders. The nameplate before each displayed the logo of a Fortune Global 500 corporation. An elderly Japanese businessman with white hair nodded toward Ji Yunshang. He spoke accented English. You must be Miss Ji, who signed the Eston contract. The younger generation is impressive. Ji Yunshang answered in Japanese. You are too kind. The old man's eyes brightened. He had not expected a young Chinese woman to speak such fluent Japanese. Li Yanghang looked at her as well. He had not known she spoke Japanese. In fact, he was beginning to realize that he knew less about her than the business leaders meeting her for the first time. The summit followed its normal schedule. Several chief executives from international corporations delivered speeches. They discussed data, industry trends, and globalization strategies. Each speech sounded more complicated than the previous one. Li Yushan sat in the rear guest section and filled a notebook with notes. She looked like a student preparing for a final examination. Then the host walked onto the stage and cleared his throat. Distinguished guests, we will now begin a special event added to this year's summit. Recently, a cross-border partnership in the Asia-Pacific region attracted international attention. An order worth more than 100 billion yuan was signed in only 10 minutes. This is extremely rare in global commercial history. Today, we are honored to invite the Chinese representative who signed that agreement. The host looked at the card in his hand. Miss Ji Yunshang, please come to the stage and share your experience for 5 minutes. The room became silent for one moment. Then applause began in the first row and moved backward like a wave. Every person inside the 2,000-seat hall looked toward the young woman in the dark green velvet dress beside Li Yanghang. Ji Yunshang stood and adjusted her skirt. She walked toward the stage with calm steps as she passed Li Yanghang. He spoke softly. Go. The word was as light as wind. She stood before the podium. More than 2,000 pairs of eyes watched her. A spotlight surrounded her with bright light. She carried no prepared speech. She only lowered the microphone slightly and began. Good afternoon. Many versions of the EDSA negotiation have appeared in public. Today, I would like to share the real story. Her voice was not loud, but the surrounding speakers carried it through the entire hall. The business leaders below unconsciously sat straighter. Many people here may not know that I entered a Li Corporation conference room for the first time only 3 days ago. Before that, I spent 3 years living in the rear courtyard of an old family estate. There was an osmanthus tree in the courtyard. It bloomed twice each year. When I became tired from reading, I sat beneath it and drank tea. The tea was inexpensive. The flowers were fragrant. Several executives in the front row displayed surprise. Someone turned toward Li Yanghang in the rear. Li Yushan tightened her fists until her nails entered her palms. This was exactly what she feared. A bride brought into the family to bring good fortune had been neglected for 3 years. Now she had become the greatest contributor to Li Corporation. If the public discovered the truth, the Li family would be humiliated. Ji Yunshang continued. The most important thing I learned during those 3 years had nothing to do with international trade or negotiation. I learned it while reading professional books again and again beneath that osmanthus tree. The world will not knock on your door by itself. You must walk outside. Even if there is only one window before you, you must push it open. She paused and looked across the hall. When I worked on the EDSA project, I had no powerful resources or special connections. I began with the most basic public information, EDSA's annual reports, its website, and the German language subpages. I separated every clause in the contracts of its global partners. Then I identified the logic behind its decisions. For every part of that logic, I prepared data and solutions in advance. On the day of the negotiation, I had an answer to every question Mr. Herman asked. It was not because I was unusually intelligent, it was because I had completed the preparation. Her voice became firmer. We often believe great commercial legends are far away from ordinary people, but when those legends are separated into smaller pieces, they are only collections of simple tasks: an annual report, a pricing notice, an overlooked subpage, a detail no one considered important. If you are willing to spend time on those small things, you have already surpassed 90% of people. The remaining 10% is the courage to push open the window. Ji Yunshang stepped backward and bowed slightly. That is everything I wanted to share, thank you. The applause was thunderous. 2,000 people stood simultaneously. They formed a dark C. The white-haired business leaders in the front applauded first. The Japanese man even removed his glasses and wiped his eyes. In the media section, camera shutters sounded like heavy rain striking a metal roof. Someone shouted for Miss G to continue. Reporters posted live updates with frantic speed. Li Yushan did not stand. She remained in her guest seat. Her notebook fell to the floor. Her lips trembled, and her expression looked as though lightning had struck her. She had known Ji Yunshang existed for 3 years. She had never considered her important. A young bride used to bring good fortune. A countrywoman who had not even entered the Li estate through the main door. Why should anyone respect her? Now 2,000 people at the leading global business summit stood and applauded the same countrywoman. Li Yanghang also stood. He remained in the center of the first row while everyone applauded. He silently watched the woman surrounded by light on stage. Her head was tilted slightly. The spotlight drew gentle lines across her face. The hem of her dark green dress moved around her feet. 3 years earlier, he had not seen her face clearly. Today, cameras from across the world focused on her. The wife he had forgotten in the side residence never needed his assistance. Yet she had conquered everyone in the field he valued most. That evening, after the summit, Ji Yunshang returned to the side residence. Li Yanghang did not send her there, she returned by choice. After the summit ended, several executives from multinational groups surrounded Li Yanghang. While he spoke with them, she left through a side entrance, called a taxi, and gave the driver the address behind the family estate. 3 missed calls from assistant Lin appeared on her phone. She replied, "I returned to the side residence to pack. I will see you at tomorrow's birthday banquet." Then she silenced the phone and closed her eyes against the back seat. The city lights moved past, the bright commercial district became the quiet old city. Finally, the car stopped before the familiar iron gate. The osmanthus trees were still flowering. During the 3 days she had been away, another layer of golden petals had fallen across the stone path. They felt soft beneath her shoes, sweet fragrance filled the air. She entered the small house and turned on the light. The jasmine tea she had left on the coffee table remained in the same place. A thin dry layer covered the surface. The books had not moved. Several international trade textbooks leaned together on the shelf. One plain cushion had fallen from the sofa. She picked it up, brushed away the dust, and returned it. Everything inside the home carried traces of her 3 years there. But none of it belonged to her. The house was not hers, the furniture was not hers. Even the bookshelf was an old item from the Li family estate. She had only borrowed the place for 3 years. Now the rental period had ended. She removed a suitcase from the dressing room. It was the same canvas suitcase she had brought from her hometown. The zipper often became stuck. She folded her clothes into it one by one: white blouses, dark blue trousers, pale grey clothes for home. Every item was clean. She selected several important books and placed them in the side pocket. The rest could remain for whoever lived there next. While she packed, her phone screen illuminated. Her mother had sent a long voice message. Ji Yunshang hesitated, put on her earphones, and played it. "Yunshang, your father returned to the hospital for another examination today. The doctor said his condition is slightly better than last month, but we still need approximately 150,000 yuan for the next treatment. I know life is difficult for you in the city, but I truly do not have another way." The final words disappeared into restrained sobbing. Ji Yunshang sat on the edge of the bed. Her phone rested on her knees as the long voice message reached its end. Her father had been diagnosed with cirrhosis 3 years earlier. He was transferred from the county hospital to a major city hospital, then to a specialist hospital in the provincial capital. The treatment costs grew like a snowball. The largest reason she had accepted the marriage arranged by the Li family was that the bride price was enough to place her father in the best hospital. During the following 3 years, she remained in the side residence and studied desperately. She earned an international trade qualification and quietly completed her university degree. She had only one purpose: she wanted to earn enough through her own ability to repay everything. After signing the Eston contract, a significant commission was added to her account. Together with 3 years of salary savings, it was enough to pay all of her father's medical expenses. There would even be enough remaining to rent a small apartment in the city and bring her parents there. She had never asked Li Yanghang for money. She had never withdrawn anything beyond her salary. She simply kept the commission statement and waited for the contract to become active. "Mom, do not worry about the money. I will transfer it before the end of the month." She typed the reply, placed the phone face down on the bed, and continued packing. Halfway through folding her clothes, the doorbell rang. She believed assistant Lin had sent someone to deliver something. She wiped her hands and opened the door. Li Yushan stood outside. She was not wearing the pink Chanel suit. A dark purple knitted dress and short black coat covered her. Her makeup was heavier than during dinner. The lipstick was as dark as dried blood. No one stood behind her. She carried an Hermes Birkin bag and waited beneath the osmanthus tree. The false sweetness from dinner had disappeared. Only open coldness remained. "May I enter?" Her tone sounded like an announcement rather than a request. Ji Yunshang stepped aside. Li Yushan entered the living room and looked around. Her gaze passed over the fabric sofa, the bookshelf, the tea, and the suitcase on the floor. The corner of her mouth turned down. "You are packing." She sat on the sofa and placed the handbag across her knees. She crossed her legs. "That is good. After grandmother's banquet, you should leave. I came to make one thing clear. Understand your position and do not refuse to go." Ji Yunshang leaned against the doorway. She did not sit or offer tea. She waited. "Do you believe one contract will allow you to remain in the Li family?" Li Yushan's voice became sharp. "My cousin and I grew up together. The Li and Wen families have known each other for 3 generations. I am the only person grandmother considers suitable to become her grandson's wife. As for you, you were only a tool brought here to create good fortune. Once the marriage arrangement between cousin and the Wen family is announced at grandmother's banquet, you will have no use." Ji Yunshang remained silent for a moment, then she walked to the coffee table and picked up the divorce agreement. She opened it to the final page and placed one finger on the signature line. Li Yanhang's name was missing, her own name was already there. You do not need to explain so much. I signed the divorce agreement. I will leave after the birthday banquet. She looked at Li Yushan, her eyes remained as calm as water without wind. But you are mistaken about one thing. Wanting to marry Li Yanghang is your problem. I have never been your competitor or an obstacle. If you possess the ability to make him marry you, I will not stop you. Li Yushan could no longer maintain her smile. She stood, the handbag shifted across her knees, her expression changed from coldness to open malice. She stepped closer and lowered her voice. You sound generous, but no one knows what you truly think. I came to warn you about something. Do not believe your success at the summit means everything is over. An announcement will be made during the birthday banquet. Then you will understand your true position in the Li family. She turned and left, her heels struck the stone path sharply at the gate. She looked back at Ji Yunshang standing in the doorway. One more thing. You have been seated at the table nearest the entrance. You will sit with the drivers and servants. Cousin and grandmother both know. Neither objected. The iron gate closed loudly. The sound of high heels disappeared along the Osmanthus lane. Ji Yunshang remained still, then she returned to the bedroom, placed the final clothes inside the suitcase, closed the zipper, and moved it against the wall. A small mirror hung there, it reflected her face, her eyes were slightly red, but no expression appeared. She turned off the lamp and sat on the edge of the bed in darkness, her hands rested on her knees, her back remained straight. Outside, Osmanthus petals continued falling, they touched the window with almost inaudible sounds. Grandmother's birthday banquet was the final task. On Monday evening, the Li family estate was filled with light. The banquet took place in the main hall, 8 round rosewood tables filled the room, each seated 12 people. The guests included 3 generations of Li family relatives and the family's most important business partners. A huge red symbol for longevity hung from the beams, golden longevity peaches and flower baskets lined both sides, a new red carpet covered the floor. Old Madame Li sat in the center of the main table. She wore a bright red traditional gown decorated with circular floral patterns. Her silver hair and red clothing made her appear both festive and commanding. When Ji Yunshang arrived, housekeeper Wu met her at the entrance. Embarrassment appeared on his face. Madam, your seat is. He hesitated and pointed toward the table nearest the door. Several drivers, 2 servants, and a junior employee from administration sat there. There were no name cards on the table. I understand. Ji Yunshang walked directly to the table and sat in an empty chair. The drivers and servants recognized her. No one dared speak, they only exchanged nervous glances. Ji Yunshang poured tea and drank slowly. The main table was lively. Li Yushan sat beside old Madame Li in a bright red strapless gown. Her hair was styled high, diamond earrings reflected the light. She peeled grapes for the old woman while speaking and laughing. Occasionally, she looked toward Li Yanghang on the other side of old Madame Li. Possessiveness filled her eyes. Li Yanghang wore a dark blue traditional suit. He sat beside the head position. From the moment Ji Yunshang entered, his gaze repeatedly moved toward the door. When he saw her seated at the outer table, his brow tightened. He placed down his wine and began standing. Old Madame Li pressed one hand against his arm. Yanghang, offer a toast to Uncle Wen first. Li Yanghang turned toward his grandmother. Her smile remained unchanged, but the hand against his arm possessed considerable strength. After 2 seconds, he lifted his glass toward Wen Shihong beside him. Their glasses touched. He drank everything, then he placed down the glass and stood. Grandmother, I am bringing Yunshang here. She is fine where she is. Old Madame Li's tone was not loud, but it allowed no refusal. Today is my birthday. It is not an event for you to rearrange seats. Sit down. Li Yanghang stood beside the table with one hand against its surface. Relatives noticed the movement. Their conversations quieted. Li Yushan took a sip of wine. A satisfied curve appeared on her mouth at that moment. Housekeeper Wu ran from the front courtyard. He spoke beside Li Yanghang. Li Yanhang's expression changed. He placed down his glass and walked quickly toward the entrance. Housekeeper Wu then hurried to old Madame Li and whispered several words. The old woman's hand stopped around her cup. A rare shock appeared across her aged face. Steady footsteps sounded beyond the main door. An elderly man with white hair appeared at the entrance. He wore a black Zhongshan suit. A golden badge rested on his chest. An ebony cane supported one hand. 4 people in black formal clothing followed him. The man appeared to be around 80. His back was slightly bent, but his energy remained powerful. His eyes shone beneath the lights. When old Madame Li saw his face, she stood so quickly that the teacup nearly fell. When Shihong caught it, She walked from behind the main table much faster than usual. 3 steps from the old man, she stopped. General G, her voice trembled, disbelief filled her face. Why are you here? The entire hall erupted. Several older guests stood simultaneously. General G, that G family. I heard the G family had lived overseas in seclusion for decades. Why would he come here? General G answered no one. He stood in the center of the hall with his cane. His gaze passed over every person and stopped at the table nearest the entrance. It rested on the young woman in a dark green velvet gown sitting quietly among drivers and servants. Girl, they placed you here. His voice was old but powerful. Every word reached every corner of the hall. Ji Yunshang placed down her tea and stood. She adjusted her dress and bowed slightly. Grandfather, 2 words. The air disappeared from the room. Li Yushan's wineglass fell onto the table. Red wine spread across the white cloth. Her mouth remained open. Her perfect makeup looked ridiculous beneath the lights. Her eyes widened as though they would leave their sockets. Grandfather. General Ji was Ji Yunshang's grandfather. The young bride, treated as a country girl and seated with servants, was a descendant of the Ji family. Old Madame Li's expression changed from shock to extreme complexity. Her lips moved for a long time. Before she spoke, General Ji, your granddaughter has been married into our family for 3 years. Why did no one mention? 3 years. General Ji struck the floor with his cane. The sound was heavy. His gaze moved from old Madame Li to Li Yushan, then to Wen Shihong and the guests. Everyone he looked at instinctively stepped backward. My granddaughter married into your family 3 years ago. You abandoned her in a side residence and ignored her. You left her alone on the night of her wedding, and today, during the old woman's birthday, you seated her. He looked toward the table. What is this? Beside the entrance, he turned toward Ji Yunshang. Anger shook his voice. Girl, have you lived like this for 3 years? Why did you not tell grandfather? Ji Yunshang remained silent for a long time. Every eye watched her. All sound disappeared except the faint fragrance of osman thus drifting from the courtyard. Grandfather, when I married into the Li family, my father needed medical treatment. At that time, the Ji family had already lost contact with us. I accepted the money available to me and completed the responsibility I had chosen. Her voice was quiet. Every word landed steadily. These 3 years were my choice. I do not blame anyone. General Ji looked at her. His old eyes turned red. Then he faced old Madame Li and struck his cane against the floor. What an excellent marriage for good fortune. You used the blood of my Ji family to bring fortune to yours, then treated her like grass. When the Ji family still lived in this country, half of the business community trembled when we moved. What is the Li family compared with us? No one dared respond. Old Madame Li's hand trembled around her cane. She had dominated business circles throughout her life. Now she could not answer an 8-year-old man's accusations. General Ji walked forward and looked beyond her toward Li Yanghang. Li Yanghang stood beside the main table. From the moment General Ji entered, his gaze had not left Ji Yunshang. You are Li Yanghang? Yes. Li Yanghang stood straight without avoiding the old man's eyes. General Ji examined him for a long time. Then he spoke one sentence that silenced the room again. My granddaughter married you 3 years ago. You barely saw her. Now she has signed a 100 billion yuan contract for your company, and you have finally decided to treat her well. He struck the floor. His voice was as cold as winter iron. My granddaughter does not need this small amount of kindness from you. She can leave with me now. He turned toward Ji Yunshang and extended his hand. Girl, come with grandfather. Ji Yunshang looked at the hand. Age spots and blue veins covered it. It was the same hand she had held while running through her grandfather's courtyard as a child. She had not seen him for more than 10 years. After her father's business failed, the Ji family ended contact with them. Later, her parents divorced. She followed her father back to his hometown and lost contact with the Ji family completely. She did not know how her grandfather learned she would be there. Perhaps he saw the summit report. Perhaps he discovered it another way. She stepped forward. Li Yanghang walked quickly from the main table. He stopped between Ji Yunshang and her grandfather. He did not block anyone. He simply stood there. Every person waited for the powerful president of Li Corporation to speak. His first sentence stunned them. Grandfather, I was blind for 3 years. There was no defense, no excuse, no carefully prepared business language. It was a direct admission. General Ji's eyebrows moved slightly. He said nothing. She lived alone in the side residence for 3 years, and I never visited once. She studied international trade, completed her degree, earned professional qualifications, and prepared the Eston proposal. She did everything through her own effort. Li Yanhang's voice remained quiet. Every word fell like a nail into the silent room. When she signed the 100 billion yuan contract, she asked for nothing. When she handed me the divorce agreement, she did not request a single cent. She quietly completed every responsibility and prepared to leave alone. He paused and turned toward Ji Yunshang. The hall was filled with guests. But when he looked at her, nothing else seemed to exist. Ji Yunshang. He spoke her full name, not Miss Ji, not another title. He said it like a word whose meaning he had finally understood. His voice was so low that the Osmanthus fragrance almost seemed to cover it. For 3 years, I did not look at you. That was my fault. For 3 years, I never asked whether you were cold, hungry, or well. That was my fault. You suffered inside the Li family, and I knew nothing. That was also my fault. He stepped forward and removed a velvet box from inside his coat. He opened it. A ring rested inside. It was completely different from the ring used during the wedding 3 years earlier. That ring had been a plain silver symbol for the good fortune marriage. This was a true custom diamond ring. Small diamonds surrounded a platinum band and reflected soft but unmistakable light. Will you give me one more opportunity? Li Yanghang lowered himself onto one knee. A wave of shocked breaths moved through the hall. The president of Li Corporation, the man feared by every opponent in business, wore his most formal traditional suit and knelt before Ji Yunshang in front of every Li family relative and important business partner. I am not asking you to forgive me. Immediately, he looked into her eyes. I am only asking you not to leave. Ji Yunshang looked down at Li Yanghang kneeling on the red carpet. His eyes were red. The man who had never shown weakness before anyone had allowed emotion to enter his eyes for the first time. She watched him for a long time, then she extended her hand. She did not accept the ring. She helped him stand. After Li Yanghang rose, Ji Yunshang turned and picked up a document she had prepared, the divorce agreement. Only one signature was missing on the final page, Li Yanhang's. She opened the document and lifted a pen in front of everyone. Every person held their breath. Li Yushan gripped the tablecloth until her fingers turned white. Old Madame Li stood with her cane. The wrinkles on her face appeared especially deep beneath the light. Ji Yunshang turned to the final page. The tip of her pen rested on the signature line. Then she raised her head and said something no one expected. My condition is this. You said you want to begin again, then pursue me first. Pursue me from the beginning. I am not the young bride brought into the Li family for good fortune. I am Ji Yunshang. Whether you can win me depends on your ability. She pushed the document toward him. Li Yanghang looked at the agreement she had already signed. She could have left at any moment. Then he smiled. It was probably the first time anyone in the room had seen such an expression on his face. It was not the polite smile he used during business events. It was not the carefully controlled expression he showed at press conferences. It was real. Relief and determination existed inside it. Fine, he said. I will pursue you from the beginning. He accepted the divorce agreement, but he did not sign. He tore it in half as the pieces fell onto the red carpet. General Ji watched for a long time, then he began laughing. His powerful old laughter filled the main hall. Good. The girls of the Ji family possess dignity. There is no reason to accept the title. Immediately, make him pursue you. He walked to Ji Yunshang and patted her shoulder. Then he glared at Li Yanghang. Young man, pursuing a woman is much more difficult than signing a contract. You should begin studying. Li Yanghang stood before the guests for the first time. Someone had left him without a response. He only looked at Ji Yunshang. The smile remained on his face. After the banquet ended, Ji Yunshang left the estate with her grandfather. Moonlight and fallen osmanthus petals covered the lane. General Ji walked ahead with his cane. She supported his arm beside him. The old man moved slowly, but every step was steady. Girl, do you truly intend to let him pursue you? General Ji asked. Yes. Ji Yunshang nodded. I spent 3 years alone. One kneeling apology cannot erase everything. If he wants to pursue me, he should pursue me properly. General Ji laughed again. The sound echoed through the quiet lane. He patted the back of her hand and said nothing more. A black car waited at the entrance. The door opened. Ji Yunshang helped her grandfather inside. Before entering, she turned and looked at the Li family estate. The brightly illuminated house became smaller behind them. Finally, it disappeared from the rearview mirror. 1 month later, the cover story of Global Business Weekly carried the following headline: Li Corporation President Li Yanghang photographed personally delivering breakfast to his wife for 30 consecutive days. From osmanthus cakes to crab roe soup, dumplings. He never repeated the same meal. When reporters asked for a comment, he gave only one answer: I am pursuing my wife. Do not block the way.